Here you're ready for your dose of reality. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dr. Quack podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Quack, and
I'm the important one, Mr. Mayhem, and today we've got a very important show. I wore a gold tie to make sure because today we got a flair for the gold.
that we do. 1983 was the year. Starcade, the very first pay-per-view really to come out, unlike Vince McMahon wanted us to believe. But but we have a good card here. This was really solid here. Yeah, on commentary you had Gordon Soley with Bob Russell.
Oh, Bob Caudle.
Oh, Bob Caudle, excuse me. Yeah, it was Bob Caudle. My apologies. Tony Schiavone and Barbara Clary doing the interviews.
This is where Tony Schiavone was doing what he should have been doing. He should have been anything more than a backstage guy. So that embarrassment he sent us through for years on WCW, if you watch this, you'll understand why one person thought he was actually talented at one time.
Definitely. Let's break it down here. Opening match here, the Mast Assassins with Paul Jones taking on Rufus R. Jones and Bugsy McGraw.
You know, I always liked Paul Jones because he brought a certain amount of class to the ring. He always showed up in the ring in suits, tuxedos. He presented his people with class.
Yeah, I mean, I love the match, like, in general. I thought Bugsy McGraw was just, he was a wild one to watch, and Rufus as well. Like, they were very entertaining. However, Bugsy and those side bumps, I'm just like, what was that?
Well, Bugsy McGraw, the first time I ever really watched Bugsy McGraw, they tried to team him with Boogie Woogie Jimmy Valiant because they had similar wrestling styles, but they did not have similar charisma. Rufus R. Jones was the charisma of that match. Mr. Electricity, Rufus R. Jones, he definitely was good at keeping the crowd entertained, keeping the crowd involved. And for those of you that were not familiar with the Assassins, the Mast Assassins, they were actually a stable. There was 3 to 4 of them. But this one we believe was Jody Hamilton and Hercules Hernandez under the hoods for this show.
I'm telling you, Hernandez is making it everywhere in these podcasts, ain't he?
And I wish he would.
But he is.
Stop that. No more Hercules Hernandez matches.
Oh, I can't promise that. But the Masked Assassins ended up winning with the Schoolboy there, getting the victory. I gave the match 2 stars.
I gave it 2 stars as well. It felt a little thrown together from the standpoint of it didn't feel cohesive, like there was a great story. I don't remember much of that being a story. This is more just the NWA trying to get a different feel of some of their different territories that had big names. So I don't feel there was a lot thrown to this match except, hey, go out there and give the crowd some entertainment, and Rufus definitely did that.
Yeah, he definitely did. Now moving on here, Johnny Weaver and Scott McGee taking on Kevin Sullivan and Mark Lewin with Gary Hart. I love Gary Hart. He's the most underrated manager, I believe, of all time. And to see him working with a very young Kevin Sullivan there.
Yes, and Gary Hart managed my favorite wrestler of all time, Gino Hernandez. So Gary Hart, while not as well known internationally, ranks right up there with the best of them. And that is very true. And Kevin Sullivan just recently turned. He used to team with Superman Tony Atlas before he made this turn. Johnny Weaver and Scott McGee, who has been around for a while. He managed to win the Pacific Northwest Tag Team title with Kurt Hennig. He also was in the WWF for a couple of years, although he was basically a jobber to the Stars. Scott McGee really held this match together. Johnny Weaver was starting to get a little bit older. Sullivan and Lewin went over. It was a very, very old school match. And they got good color in this match. Something you don't see a lot anymore is color or blood for extreme accentuation of the point. And I gave this 2 stars with 1 extra star just from the match really tied together well towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I saw. I saw it about 2.5. That blade job at the end, that was great.
That was the extra star, yes.
Yes.
The cohesive at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, a great setup here. You also had Carlos Colon, old school legend there, taking on Abdullah the Butcher.
Yeah, the color commentary team, Gordon Soley and Bob Cottle, really put over that. For those of you that didn't know, Carlos Colon ran what was known as the World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico. It's a very ultra-violent feud. Abdullah the Butcher spent a lot of time there. Bruiser Brody was murdered there, so if it gives you an idea of the kind of people that were in that area. But it was also partially owned by Gorilla Monsoon. So they really put over that this match was going to be too violent and too extreme for Puerto Rico, and they brought it here to be shown on television. And while the match was not a technical classic, it wasn't meant to be. Abdullah the Butcher, this match came out in '83. Abdullah the Butcher started wrestling in 1958. So this match was not meant to be a 5-star classic, but it gets 3 stars from the gold standard.
Yeah, I went again. I went 2.5. I liked at the beginning when he took out, I believe it was the fork, and just started jabbing him in the head
right off the get-go. And then Carlos took it back and started standing back. The referee let this one go. They should have put that over a little better on the commentary team. But all in all, a solid match that the early 80s NWA Brass Knuckles crowd enjoyed.
Yeah. I mean, overall, yeah, it was a great fight. I enjoyed that. Here you go. Wahoo McDaniel and Mark Youngblood taking on Dick Slater and Bob Orton. Not Cowboy Bob Orton.
This was a very good roller coaster match. Mark Youngblood, the younger brother of Jay Youngblood. Jay Youngblood would team with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat for many years. Mark and Jay Youngblood, they tried that and it didn't work. So they split him apart and they put Mark Youngblood with Wahoo to try and help him along. And Wahoo did a really good job of that. Dick Slater and Bob Orton, very, very solid team. Bob Orton again taking all the bumps because, well, he can bump. He's Bob Orton. Less said about him, the better. This match went slightly too long for me, but it was still a really good storytelling match. I gave it 2.5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, Orton hit the superplex, went over with the victory on that. But the big story at the end of it there is where they took Wahoo's arm and they ended up breaking it, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
they went into the storyline of breaking his arm shortly after that. That was setting up for him to win, I believe it was a U.S. title or a TV title shortly thereafter.
Yeah, it was definitely in that time frame. I gave it 2.5. I thought it was fairly decent. I mean, it helped build the card. I will say that. The next match here, Charlie Brown against the Great Kabuki with Gary Hart for the TV title versus Mask.
Charlie Brown from out of town, and he should have stayed out of town.
Downtown Charlie Brown.
No, he was Charlie Brown from out of town. This match, I gave it 2 stars, and that's too high. But, because the story at least was there. That's why I gave it 2 stars. But this match was the battle of the rest hold. The claw against the sleeper hold. 12 minutes, and 10 of it was the claw versus the sleeper hold. Yeah. No.
I mean, I give it its respect. Just because, the fans were into that. I mean,
the fans were into the hot ending. The ending was very hot.
Yes.
Especially with Charlie Brown from out of town, a.k.a. Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant, winning the television title.
You couldn't tell it was him, could you?
Yeah, you're right. That might have been Billy Gibbons. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a 3-star match. I actually was fairly entertained. I mean, getting to see the Great Kabuki is always a treat, I feel like.
Fair point.
Because you don't get to see him in the States very often. But
and usually when they did bring him in, it was just as a feud ender or as the monster that gets crushed to make the babyface look good. So see him doing something that mattered was a good thing to see.
Yeah. Here you go. Roddy Piper against Greg Valentine. Dog collar match for the U.S. title.
Very, very brutal match. For those of you that didn't know, this was set up by Greg Valentine accidentally breaking Roddy Piper's eardrum. And that happened a couple of months before this match, so they had to figure out a way to blow this match off. And this match was it. This would rank right up there with Buzz Sawyer, Tommy Rich, The Last Battle of Atlanta for the brutality of a blow-off, the intensity. This was a great match. I gave it 3.5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very high on this match because, I mean, the carnage that was in the ring, I'm like, you wouldn't see that today. You just would not see, you know, the devastation that they put on each other. You know, I gave it 4 stars. I felt like this is probably one of NWA's probably best matches they've ever had on a show. Like, I'm going all over it. But, yeah, this is definitely one of the top ones.
This was a high one. The only reason I gave it a 3.5 instead of a 4-star is because there was a little bit of sloppiness in the match. Part of it was due to the intensity of the match, but I felt in some ways they kind of forgot what they were doing and tried to start over at a few points, so I knocked them a little bit for that.
Yeah, I mean...
But all in all, he's right. It really is one of the best matches NWA put on a pay-per-view before they became WCW.
Yeah, it really was strong. Next match here, Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat taking on the Briscoe brothers. Tag team titles on the line.
Jack and Jerry Briscoe. All of you know Gerald Briscoe. For those of you that watch the current WWE, he's one of the Stooges. Double tough amateur wrestler. Wrestled for the University of Oklahoma, I believe.
Yeah. He got recently released, by the way. I'll make sure that. Yes.
Sorry to hear that. And his brother Jack Briscoe is a former NWA World Champion. Very, very talented team against another very talented team of Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. This was very basic, as most Ricky Steamboat's matches were, very basic from the standpoint of the story was a 3-year-old could understand the story. And I'm not knocking Ricky Steamboat when I say that. I'm saying that because he told something that everybody could understand.
Right. He made it, he crisped it out for everybody.
And the crowd was hot. This was also, for me, a 3.5-star match.
Yeah, that's exactly what I rated it. 3.5 star. I felt like it was very solid there. Who ended up winning that match?
Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood won that match.
That's right. I was trying to remember there. I mean, it was definitely a solid one at the end. I just remember all the chaos, all 4 of them in the ring.
Yeah. And now, before we go to the next match deserves some class, deserves some dignity, deserves some respect. What is this?
T-shirt. You don't like my shirt?
This is how you should be dressed for this match, for the importance of this. The Flair for the Gold, and you show up in old.
I know. Y'all crazy. That's why I didn't want
Folks, you want to see him start dressing better? Please leave it in the comments, because he should have dressed up for this event alone. Now, take us to it.
All right. The big main event here. Day 2, by the way. This was really wild. They had a separate match for this. Ric Flair versus Harley Race for the world title in a steel cage with a special guest referee, Gene Kiniski.
I think the match, well, I gave it a pretty good rating. Some of that is just for the referee. You don't see special guest referees or referees in general as hands-on because he understood there was no disqualification in this match. I don't know if it was a planned thing or he just was so into it of pulling people away from each other, especially Harley Race, grabbing by the hair, pulling them away, trying to keep the match going. The match felt a little flat for me. Harley Race had been in the ring 23 years at this point. Ric Flair this was his second title reign. He had just lost it back to Harley Race like 4 months before in June, so this would have been 5 months before.
Right.
And they really pushed this thing, the whole pay-per-view was always a Flair for the gold, a Flair for the gold, a Flair for the gold. What was the lady's name again?
The commentator?
Yeah,
That was Barbara Clary.
Barbara Clary. She was out there interviewing fans, which I liked the way that they took just average fans. They didn't get the people that marked out and screamed and yelled like you get on WWF television. You just got the average family. Yes, ma'am, we think Ric Flair's going to win. You know, we came here to see Ric Flair to Flair for the gold. You didn't get insanos. You got some regular average fans. And they did a good job of putting over the importance of this night.
They did. What'd you give the match?
Like I said, while the match felt flat, the match itself was very, very, very important. This was Harley Race. By the way, Ric Flair did regain the title. It was a sloppy crossbody block, but one of the other things I also liked, the crossbody block was a finisher by Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and when somebody else used it, they didn't kick out of it. It didn't make Ricky Steamboat look bad. So, while the match was a little flat, historically it was very, very, very important. I did give it 3 stars.
Yeah, I mean, I went with 3.5. I would have went higher, but I'm going to tell you why I didn't go higher. The ending of it. Okay, I get it. Flair won the championship, but when you have roughly 15 minutes of programming of him celebrating and then the interviews afterwards, post-game interviews.
22 minutes.
Right, 22 minutes, exactly. I mean, I get it. You know, that you should have saved that for another show. I think personally, and I think that's where WWE picked up on it. They knew how to end, you know, their shows like that, you know, back in the days.
Yeah, Tony Schiavone interviewed Ric Flair 3 times in that 22 minutes.
Right, it made no sense. I mean, the match itself was really good. Like you said, Gene Kiniski really did a great job refereeing that match. You know, so overall, yeah, I gave it a 3.5.
And I gave it 3 stars. And my biggest thing I've got written down here, too much post-match. You know, like you said, this was a 2-part or 2-day event. The Flair for the Gold was the match just by itself. And it felt like they were figuring out how to fill time instead of moving another match. They could have moved, let me take a look here. They could have moved the Wahoo, Mark Youngblood, and Bob Orton Dick Slater to day 2 to warm up the crowd for a Flair for the Gold. And I think that the cohesiveness of the show would have been a whole lot better.
Yeah, I think that made a lot of sense. You know, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you check out our previous podcasts here as we went over WrestleMania 1 through 3. But get ready for the next one we're getting ready to do as we cover this one right here.
Nice. Very nice.
So I'm Dr. Quack.
I'm the important one, Mr. Mayhem. And make sure you leave comments telling him to get dressed. He needs to dress appropriately. He needs to show you guys some respect that you deserve.
And I'm out.